nice event.
It was a nice event.
I know some people used to love reflections and all of that. It's not that I hated them, but it was, it's a thing.
Because people just want to talk.
You can hang out and be at a party and feel special and not have to listen to speeches.
What's the event like? It's calling us. We're getting ready for the dance party. Okay.
What is the program? What's the first? We're in here first?
With the whole thing's in there.
The whole thing's in here.
Everyone's just outside because it's so beautiful.
It is. It's so
When was the
beautiful.
last time you saw us be the first in a
Wow.
You'll leave in town tomorrow? No, next week.
Where are y'all going? Somewhere fun?
Costa Rica.
Oh.
We've got a lot to do over there.
Okay. I was supposed to say, you need your hiking shoes and bathing suit.
And sandals.
And sandals.
Okay.
Okay, right. Are you doing like a jungle hike or whatever, rainforest, all that kind of fun stuff?
So you've been?
You know what, I have been, and I'm slightly embarrassed to say, I went to a yoga retreat there, but this is embarrassing, like I mostly stayed at the yoga hotel and the surrounding areas. I didn't go on any excursions. I just did yoga every today.
So,
That was it. My focus, but I know how to do yoga retreats, and I know I need to
Have a family dinner.
I was just exhausted, and I was like, it was, don't ask me where it was, the name of the hotel was Sunshine. It was a hotel, I think it was very beautiful, and so I have some of the group, but up front, yoga that they were. It's not terrible, that's all I'm embarrassed. I just remember any of the details, that part. This was like having 10 years. So I have a little excuse right here. 10 years ago. Yes. I never did.
This week you this whole talking about. We like going so
Yeah, mine does mine. Some tape there. Before we hear from Rachel and have a fascinating virtual tour of Tel Aviv, just want to acknowledge where we are. It's the final moments really of Yom Ha'atzma'ut, going into Yom Ha'atzma'ut, and really important days, and just recognizing how complicated and painful in some ways it's become to be Jewish and to be Zionists and to care deeply about Israel. And I feel, this is something that Nate and I sort of cooked up. It's been a long time since we did our own program for Yom Ha'atzma'ut on Shalom. We used to do stuff, and recently we just tuned into whatever else is going on in the community. Many of us were at the Yom Ha'atzma'ut thing at the JCC last night with IAC, which was a very moving and powerful ceremony indeed. And I just, many of you here have spent way more time in Israel than I have, but I feel like I spent a pretty decent amount of time in Israel. Day of such solemnity, of where everything on the radio and the TV is just story after story of people who have been lost, either soldiers or people lost in terrorist attacks. And the mood is so somber and so reflective. And then very quickly it changes, and suddenly it's Yom Ha'atzma'ut, and people, fireworks and people smashing each other over the head with giant inflatable hammers, which is a thing I never understood. and spraying each other with shaving foam, and then the next day it's all mangalim, the barbecues, and all of that. And it's just a very quick, and for some people quite unsettling transition, because people who are very recent in their mourning of loved ones, it's a big shift to make. And very different. Yom HaZikaron, you would translate Yom HaZikaron as Memorial Day. Memorial Day here is very different to Memorial Day in Israel. There's not a single person who is. Well, the barbecue's the next day. You don't have barbecues on Memorial Day. Oh, here? Oh, no, here, yeah. Here it's Memorial Day, barbecues, sales, whatever else it is. So I just wanted. So we're going to just. Before Rachel speaks, we're going to just have a very short tekes, a ceremony that kind of helps us mark that transition from memory. We're going to start twice, once in the evening and once in the morning on Yom HaZikaron. There's a siren that goes off, and the siren goes off and everybody stops what they're doing. And so we're going to show this video of the siren in and around Israel. And just invite you, if you're comfortable, to stand and just begin with the silence of the siren. just to acknowledge that those are old numbers. It's at this point way over 30,000.
How old is she?
Sorry.
And Yom Ha'atzma'ut is not just the day where we remember the fallen soldiers, it's also the day when we remember everyone whose lives have been lost, including in communities outside Israel, including the people who were murdered on Bondi Beach in Sydney, including Karen Diamond, who was murdered here in Boulder, including all of the victims of terrorist attacks around the world who died for being Israelis or died for being Jews. And we remember them. And I'm going to chant the Yizkor that you can see here for all of those whose lives have been lost in the years of war and conflict in Medinat Israel. Yizkor Elohim et nishmot kol acheinu ve'achioteinu b'nei Yisrael שהקריבו את נפשותיהם בדרך להקמת מדינת ישראל ובהגנתה, וכל אלה שנטבחו במעשי הבלה בעבור שאנו מתפללים בעד הזכרת נשמתם. אנא נזכור לעולם עד גבורתם ומסירותם ותמימותם, ותהיינה נפשותיהם בשורות בצור החיים ותהי מנוחתם כבוד צבא שמחות את פניך לימוד בימינך נצח. Amen. May God remember the souls of all of those of the house of Israel who sacrificed themselves to establish the state of Israel, or who have perished in its defense, and those slaughtered in acts of terror. In their memory we pray, may the memory of their bravery, their dedication and their innocence be with us throughout time. May their souls be bound up in the bond of life. May they be remembered with honor, and may they rest in peace at your right hand forever. Amen. Amen. It's a little small on the screen, but we can say together Tefillah Shalom Medinat Yisrael, the traditional blessing for Eretz Yisrael. Avinu Shebashamayim, Zo Yisrael v'goalo, Baharek et Medinat Yisrael, Reshit Tzmichat Geulatenu, Hagen aleha b'vat chestecha, ufos aleha sukat shlomecha, ושלח אורך ועמיתך לראשיה שריה ויועציה ותקנם בעצה טובה מלפניך, חזק את ידי מגיני ארץ קודשנו והנחילם אלוהינו ישועה ונתת ניצחון תעתכם ונתת שלום בארץ ושמחת עולם ליושביה ונאמר אמן. אבינו שבשמיים, stronghold and redeemer of the people of Israel, bless the state of Israel on her 78th birthday, that it may be the beginning of our redemption. Shield it with your love, spread over it the shelter of your peace, guide its leaders and advisors with your light and your truth, help them with your good counsel, strengthen the hands of those who defend our holy land, deliver them, crown their efforts with triumph, bless the land with peace and its inhabitants with lasting joy, and let us say, Amen. Let's sing Hatikva together. Kodot baleva v'nima nefesh Yehudi omiya ufatem Yisrael kadima ayin letzion Sophia, Olada tikvateinu, tikva bat shnat alpayim, liyotam chofshi be'atzeinu, Eretz Zion Yerushalayim. Thank you all for being here. With that, I'm going to just pass it over to Rachel, who I think you've all had a chance to meet. Rachel is fully trained tour guide with the Ministry of Tourism in Israel to lead guides in Hebrew, English, Hungarian and Romanian. And tonight she's going to speaking mostly in English, right?
I can do it in Hungarian.
But as advertised, please welcome Rachel and a virtual tour of Tel Aviv.
And with that, you're being misled because I had this crazy idea of doing like a short detour. Just a little bit about Hatikva, because we just sang Hatikva and I find its history so fascinating. So I hope you're okay with that. Will you allow me like a 2 to 3 minute detour? Thank you. So that's on. Okay. Most countries have a national anthem, but it's not always so obvious who decides and when it becomes the national anthem. So Hatikva was written as a poem, Tikvateinu, by Naftali Herz Imber in 1886, as you saw that, and Naftali is this guy here. He's from Romania/Ukraine. He moves to Eretz Israel. He lives a very interesting lifestyle. Some would be willing to judge it. I tell you why in a bit, but he's not like a saint, let's put it that way. And he's the composer of this poem that you see here, Tikvateinu. It has originally 9 stanzas. It's fantastic, but people, for the sake of their lives, can never remember it. So the Hatikva that we know today is the shortened version. All right, and the guy who put it to music is this one. They weren't born together. I mean, he didn't compose the music, but his name is Samuel Cohen. He's from Romania, and he heard this folk song and decided, how do I do this? He decided, wow, this is perfect for Tikvateinu.
Că-i ferate și înapoi, încă nu erau aflate, mergeau toate călători, căci bătrânii erau moi.
It's carved with hops. That's as you see. So I think you get the idea. Right? It's very, very similar, but where does that come from? Well, Romanians didn't come up with it. It was probably based on something older, but we don't know exactly. It could be this. Well, 1 second. How do I? Sorry. My technical skills are not the. I just need to move forward in this for like about a minute. This is my Czech composer. Get the idea. It's a beautiful piece. It's about 12 or 17 minutes long. It's beautiful. I love it. I listen to it a lot, but not now. It's great. It's a piece by Czech composer. Sorry, I'm going to make it bigger again. Some of you know it? Yes. Yeah, of course. No, it's great, but it's composed in 1874. Now, it is a very it's about the Vltava River and the Bohemian countryside and how beautifully the river flows, and we kind of hear it. But this is actually based on something older, and as far as we can trace it back, is a 17th century Italian song composed by Gasparo Zanetti, and here's a version of it, and it's a so you hear it's different. It's not entirely the same, but the beginning is obviously pretty much one-on-one. So this melody travels to Europe. Maybe it gets to the Czech composer around the same time as it gets to Romania, and they have different adaptations, and eventually it becomes the perfect glove fit for Tikvateinu or Hatikva. This happened really, really early on, as you see, already in the late 19th century, and Herzl did not like it. He rejected it. He said, if you want to make that, nationalistic song composed by this vagabond, well, vagabond because he was a known heavy drinker and he lived in a love triangle in Haifa, but besides that, he was fine. Herzl did not like that very much, but it was against his force, and I'm gonna. While it's the first at the beginning of the Zionist Congresses, it's not mentioned. By the sixth one in 1903, when they vote about the Uganda plan, right? There's, by the way, a vote of 295 against 178 for and against. So Uganda is pushed aside, but the ones who rejected the Uganda plan, which stood up singing Hatikva, that it's like it became a national anthem before there was a state. It's kind of miraculous, and why? Because it's a very beautiful romantic music, and around this time we have the birth of romantic nationalistic music, and a lot of the national anthems are born around this time. This, and by 1933, the 18th Congress, it's the official anthem of the Congress. There's no state yet. What happens? Sorry. No. Sorry. What happens in Israel is not so obvious. The Hatikva, the current Hatikva, is not officially adopted as the national anthem, by the way, until 2004. And that is kind of, it just pushed through the Knesset at the same day that Yasser Arafat died, so no one will object it, but there's lots of objections to it, even today, even as of today. The last update I have is from 2016. Reuben Rivlin was offering to come up with an alternative, maybe just replace at least some of the words. I'll tell you which words exactly, but it's we go back just a bit before the birth of the State of Israel. The Hatikva is already very known in Europe. It's used as a Jewish resistance song, and this is a recording from Bergen-Belsen from 1945. Pay attention, it's a short video, but I'm going to play this, but pay attention to the lyrics. They're not exactly the same yet. The lyrics are not fixed yet towards the end. you heard the difference, and it's a very powerful because
Can
of
you
the.
say the different words?
I don't have it in front of me exactly, but I can bring you the original text. It's following the original stanzas, basically. It's hard to hear clearly. So it's already a widespread accepted, and it sort of becomes the official national anthem. And there's struggles. Why it took so long, the main struggle is that a lot of people feel that it doesn't represent everyone equally. It does not, it says, you know, we're looking eastward, but if you're Eastern Jew, you're looking westward. If you're, you know, an African Jew, you're looking northward. Like, it doesn't represent all the Jews. And let's say that there aren't just Jews living in Israel. So it doesn't represent also about 20% of the population, which is also highly problematic. So this was born, the last piece that I'm going to show you was born for the 70th anniversary of the 70th Yom Ha'atzma'ut in 2018. And I warn you, it will stir some emotions. It's supposed to, and I want you to examine that. Why? What's slightly disturbing about it? You get the idea, right? How do you feel about it?
A lot more danceable, but
Yeah.
A lot more danceable. Some people call this cultural appropriation, rightly so. You're right to be, you know, angry, whatever you feel about it. It's a lot of different things, but the main point is that Mizrahi Jews didn't listen to klezmer. You know, it's not the same. It doesn't represent, again, a very large percentage of population. And I end with the proposal of changing a few words. It's nefesh, instead of nefesh Yehudi homia, instead of the Jewish soul, they were thinking of replacing it maybe with the Israeli soul. That could be a bit more inclusive, and not Mizraha, but Arza, so not eastward, but towards Eretz Israel. And a few adjustments like that might make it more inclusive, but still a lot of people have issues with it. So that's about, I could say a lot more things. That's about the, all right, Le'inyanenu. This is what we came here for, and thank you for putting up with me until now.
That was great.
That was great.
Fascinating.
I love this picture. It's the angle of from Hayarkon Park, and when I drive in from north to Tel Aviv, I see more or less, you know, similar skyline. I see like, oh yes, home, arrived to Manhattan. It's Tel Aviv. Where are we exactly? I'm going to zoom in a second, but when we're talking about Tel Aviv and Israel, it's very important to understand the surroundings. We're basically at the meeting point of 3 continents, and we're talking Europe, we're talking Africa, and Asia, and the Arabic Peninsula, of course, but you know, it's not a coincidence that the three monotheistic religions were born here or are from here, because it's a crisscross between different people and different continents. And we feel this in our little bubble in Tel Aviv as well. Tel Aviv has two main areas, if we would differentiate between old and new. I would separate between North Tel Aviv and South Tel Aviv, which is Yafo, Jaffa. It's not all South Tel Aviv is Jaffa, but part of South Tel Aviv is Jaffa, which is the ancient city of about 4,000 years. And the newer city, which is about 120 years, less old. So there are huge contrasts, and old and new is going to be a general topic that is going to be with us for the rest of this presentation, because they constantly meet. They constantly meet here. So let's zoom in, and now that you feel that you are in Yafo, I'm here guiding you at one of the gates on Har HaPisgah, on one of the mounts of Yafo. You overlook the sea. The sea is behind me there, with the famous church tower that is the iconic Yafo skyline. And this is a gate here created by Daniel Kafri, an Israeli artist, in 1973, just after the Yom Kippur War. Why a gate, and why here, and what's with him? Yafo is symbolically a gateway too. It's not just the gateway, an entrance to the Holy Land in ancient times, also in modern times. In the Tanakh, we read about Yafo. Anyone knows where? Yeah. Of course. Betach, Yonah, that's the most obvious. Jonah is trying to ditch God and escape from his mission in Yafo. He gets on the boat and goes to the opposite direction where he was supposed to go. And it's also mentioned in the Book of Kings and other places where the temple wood, the cedars of Lebanon, are shipped from north to Yafo and then brought to Jerusalem. So Jaffa, Joppa, Yoppea, all valid names. It's mentioned, and in more modern terms, it's a gateway because the first Aliyah, the people of the very first Aliyah in the 19th century, late 19th century, arrive here. There's no other ports, there's no Haifa, there's no Ashdod, there's nothing else, there's Yafo. And it's fascinating also how they arrive, but that's a longer story, maybe a different time. So there's this ancient times and then the modern times, and the modern, the Yeshuva Hadash, the resettlement of the Holy Land that begins right here. And the very first settlers, also of the first Aliyah, would come and stay in Yafo. And some would go on and build Zichron Yaakov, and some would go on and build Rosh Pina, and some would go on and build Petach Tikva, that already existed, kind of, and so on. There's a few more cities that were established around this time, but these are some of the others. Now what? We arrived to during the first Aliyah, late 19th century. We're not talking about Tel Aviv yet. There's just this vision around this time. Again, the famous Alt Neuland, the visionary book of Theodor Herzl, is published. It's published in German. A lot of Jews read it because that's the language of culture and education. And it becomes like, wow, like a futuristic utopia, a dream, but more a political expression and guidebook a little bit too. So Herzl writes the Altneuland, and we have a few more famous people coming with the first Aliyah. Some of them are, and the second Aliyah later, some of them are Ari Akiva Weiss, who's very active, and soon becomes the advocate for establishing a new Hebrew city. I emphasize Hebrew city, not a Jewish necessarily city, and what the differences are we will understand soon. It's a very secular place. It's the place where the new cultural Jew would live. Educated Jews maybe keeps religion, but maybe not. And it has different focuses and emphasis. So he establishes a wonderful city called Homestead. That's exciting, no? Home estate, is it better? Is it a better translation of Ahuzat Bait? No? Why? It's great that you were excited about it, but they weren't so excited about it. So soon it really begins the discussion of, you know, what are we going to do about this? We need a better name. We need a better name. By the way, some of the suggestions were Herzliya. It's a great one, right? Which happens later, as we know, somewhere else. But Tel Aviv is chosen, and why? Look, I found a colored picture of Herzl. Isn't that cool? Wow. I mean, it was powerful. I thought I would use it. It's obviously AI or some more colored later, but you know, I had to. And the other person who has to do with the name is this one, Nahum Sokolov. He's a writer, also friend of Bialik, lives in Tel Aviv, comes with the first Aliyah, and he is the one who gives this loose translation to his book, Tel Aviv. Loose translation, what's his book? Herzl's book? Altneuland, Old New Land. Tel Aviv is a loose translation of that. How exactly? Tel is referring to a historical mound that we have so many of in Israel, when layer upon layer upon layer is built, and we built up history. So that's the old part. And Aviv means spring, renewal. That was the new part. So hill of spring, or old and new, Altneuland. Tel Aviv wins the race, and we didn't become Herzliya or something else. But we almost did. We're pretty close. So this is the guy I mentioned earlier, Ari Akiva Weiss, who moves here to Israel. I'm still not used to the language. So we moved to Israel in 1904. He also arrives to Yafo. He's very active in the city council. He's a businessman. He also has 6 children. Everyone comes with him. He builds the diamond industry, but amongst other things, he's also a city planner. And this is his house in the heart of this new cool place that was just renamed, well, was originally named Ahuzat Bait and renamed Tel Aviv. This is where he lived, and then this floor is added later, as you can see. But this is right on Herzl Street, which is the historical old Tel Aviv. And here you see a picture of then and now. Like every good city, you need a boulevard, right? You need a place to walk and socialize, and it's not just a place to, you know, take a route to take home, but it is a place where you walk, meet people, you hang out, and here you drive. You drive your cart at that time with horses or carriages, whatever, or cars today. But it's the same exact street. It's Rothschild Boulevard in 1903 versus a few years ago. This is the sea. Well, we can't see that anymore because it's so built up and it's a lot taller. But but that's that you see the same street, and a lot of the same houses are still around. Some of them are replaced by taller ones, as you see. What is the other thing that a city needs? Absolutely needs, of course, a cinema. You know, you gotta go and watch movies and hang out with your friends. So Eden Cinema in Tel Aviv opens in 1914, but as you know, something else happens that year. It's pretty difficult to keep operating, and Tel Aviv is also being bombed and pretty much emptied during those years. But Rife reemerges, and the fun fact about why the cinema is closed shortly after it's opened, during that time we still have the Ottoman Empire and the Turkish rule, basically. So they claim that the projectors of the cinema sent signals to the British submarines, and they were high tech already, right? We didn't know. So they closed the cinema, but then they reopened it in 2017, and it was functioning till '74. It was never a success because by the time they reopen it and picks up a little bit, then there's competition already. So, but this was the very first one. The very first one in Eretz Yisrael.
What is it now?
What is it now? It looks like this. And it's just looks like this. It's neglected. There's different ideas what's going to happen to it. There are plans for renovating it and using it as some kind of social space. It hasn't happened yet. It just looks like this. And the thing is, like, it's closed and abandoned and whatever, but these were the two windows where they sold the tickets. You know, you can still see that. All right. So here's a little bit about the growth of the city, and I just wanted to do it visually. I don't really like statistics, but I think the visual is pretty powerful. This is when I go back for a second. So we have the first one when shortly after 11 years after Tel Aviv is established, we have 2,000 people living in the city. It's not, you can't even see the line. It's so small compared to the rest. It's a tiny city, a township. It becomes in 1920. And by 1930, we have 43,000. So imagine that in a decade, it grew so much. And then by 1940, from 43,000 to 140,000. Okay. Also think about what's happening in Europe or in other places. Between 1930, this was 1930 and 1940. And then the next thing we have is 1995. This was the population. So from it grows again to 350,000 in 1995. And in 2024, we were 470,000. Around now, I think it's closer to 600,000, but altogether in the Gush Dan, area, we have about 4.5 million people, which is half of Israel's population.
That was my question.
So, okay, yeah. So Gush Dan area is the whole area of Tel Aviv and the suburbs and the, basically the central part of Israel, which is where most people live. Okay. Another thing that we need in every proper city is a proper school, right? And I'm talking about this one. Gymnasiat Herzliya, some of you are already mentioning it. It was founded in 1905, starting to be built in 1909, the same year as Ahuzat Bait is established, that later becomes Tel Aviv. Of course, you need proper education, and here it is another example what a Hebrew city means and what our priorities are. A Hebrew city means that we raise a strong, cultured Jew who's very educated, and we're gonna make him that in Hebrew. And this is the first, if you will, ever Hebrew school in the world where the subjects are taught in Hebrew. Hebrew is barely revived. Hebrew is barely born. Eliezer ben Yehuda is barely late 19th century, 1880s, 1890s, active in Jerusalem. About 10 years later, this is born and built, and it's a huge thing. It's a very hard to imagine, but they taught in Hebrew, and also Jews from abroad, outside of Palestine, sent their kids there because they wanted them to learn in Hebrew and to learn in a Jewish high school, which was fairly, which was new in here. But you see that I put these pictures together, and it's not random, because this happened in place of this. Well, it's shocking, right? Guess what? The Council for Conservation of Heritage Sites in Israel has this as a symbol. Yeah. Why? Because, and it's, you're adults now, I didn't tell that in the kids' presentation version, but every student at some point wants to knock down their school. Does it happen? Did it happen to anyone in high school? Well, the Meir brothers went to Herzliya Gymnasium, and in 1965 they built this. It's a commercial office tower, but also the bottom floors we have a museum for the early days of Tel Aviv. How did this happen? It's a great question, because this didn't exist. So right after this happened, a lot of people were struggling and had a hard time, so they put together the Council for Conservation of Heritage Sites. But this building that I'm showing you here, that was built in 1965. It was the tallest building in the Middle East. Wow. Not anymore. In 65. Not anymore, as you know. There are taller buildings than that in other neighboring countries or nearby countries. So let's move on. You might notice some of the famous visitors at the Herzliya Gymnasium. This is just outside. The picture is taken at the entrance. Who do you recognize? Einstein. Of course, Albert Einstein. He came to Israel in 1925 when Hebrew U was established, just a bit over 100 years ago, and where I studied. And next to him, you might not recognize, or you might recognize the guy. Dizengoff. It's the first mayor of Tel Aviv, Mayor Dizengoff. He was married to Tzina. They never had any children together, so his house was ultimately donated to the municipality of Tel Aviv. He meant it to be a museum commemorating things, but eventually became the Hall of Independence, where the city of the Medinat Israel was born. So that's them. I love old pictures. There's one more, just the street view, Herzl Street, and the school, the Herzliya School.
What year would you say that?
This is 40s. Early 40s or late 30s, still before the Independence Day. This is still before Independence Day, because on the car you see Palestine something, so it's still British mandate. And just like every fast-growing city, canalization, it was an issue. it was an issue. They didn't figure it out until the 1990s, and even now still there are problems and sometimes there's floods, but it was regular, absolutely regular, that southern Tel Aviv was completely flooded in the winter. And you see a poor Jew in barefoot pushing a bit wealthier Jews. Probably Jews, but he's wearing a nice hat and a nice coat, and so it's a bit of view in the past as well. And this is the house I was talking about. This is Mayor Dizengoff's home that becomes the Hall of Independence. And this is the day that we are celebrating today, tonight and tomorrow. Actually, May 14th, 1948, or Erev Chamishi B'Iyar. And you see how many people gathered here, and there's a lot more that you don't see in the picture. People gathered on the rooftops. Chairs were borrowed from nearby cafes because there weren't enough chairs inside the building, and they just planted these trees as well. It was all a big fuss, and it had to happen so quickly because the next day, May 15th, the British would leave, the mandate ended, and it had to happen on that day, but it was also a Friday. So, Friday afternoon is kind of busy for some Jews, and things shut down for those who keep Shabbat. So Paula and Ben-Gurion say bye, we have to get ready for Shabbat. No, they probably did not care about that so much, but this is also on that same day, and you see the symbol here of the Tel Aviv municipality, which is still the symbol today, a bit changed. And everyone's extremely happy and celebrating, and that's his wife, Paula. By the way, Ben-Gurion, not me, spoke 9 languages. Oh, sorry, that was in the previous session. Jacob thought I spoke 9, I don't. Ben-Gurion did.
So,
yes.
What's while all those people were celebrating, was that actually when the declaration was being read? That was happening,
Yeah.
So they were hearing it being. They were hearing David Ben-Gurion reading
the same recording that you hear over and over again, the same old radio recording of him declaring an independent state of Israel based on the 1947 29th of November UN resolution. Yes.
No, and it's interesting. That was the very first time that they came up with the word Israel.
Yeah.
Was at that time. So my father was fighting in Jerusalem at that time, and he did not even know what the name of the country was for that.
I did not know that. So here they are. I mentioned a Hebrew city, and this is a real map of a new neighborhood in the 1920s called Neve Sha'anan. What do you notice in this map, if you maybe look sideways a little bit? Yeah, so we're not just building a Hebrew city, but we're building a city with symbols and also Jewish symbols and that are important to us and represent us. By the way, this is a very strong reaction to something that was happening in Israel or Palestine before. There were groups of Christian pilgrims who came, all the German colonies, in Jerusalem, in Haifa, in other places. They were built in the shape of a cross, making a point that we want to, making a different point. And then here comes the Jewish immigrants of the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th Aliyot, and they build cities with Jewish symbols. And by the way, this was never fully executed because there's a small technical problem of some of the lands belonging to Yafo. So they could not complete it all. And if you know Tel Aviv a little bit, the central bus station, new central bus station is here. which we could talk about a lot, but it's also a very interesting history and building. But the new central bus station is here, and this is Levinsky Street, and this would be Halcyon Street, and this would be Haliyah Street, for those of you who know what I'm talking about. But Levinsky Street and Levinsky Market is known for something else, and this is where I'm going now. Here you see just another view of compared to the whole city. This is Neve Sha'anan, the part that we just looked at more closely, and this is the rest of the city, Tel Aviv. But let's go back to Levinsky and Levinsky Market. Levinsky Market is located on the central street of the menorah, at the very center of the menorah, and it's the most known spice market, the best rated spice market in the world, because it has so many different vendors and types of spices, and culinarily it's one of the leading places. So Levinsky though didn't look like this. Okay. He looked like this. Sorry to break it to you, but he's a bit more conventional looking, and he's not known. Who have you heard of him before, besides maybe hearing Levinsky Market? You heard the market, you heard the street, but even Israelis, if I ask people, they don't really know who Elchanan Lev Levinsky is. And he is a very interesting character who wrote the very first science fiction book in Hebrew. And when did he do this? He did this in 1892, which is, how many people spoke Hebrew? 1892, right? Not so many people spoke Hebrew yet, so how many people read his book? Also not so many people. But however, around the same time, just a few years later, Alt Neuland is published. How many people read that? A lot, and it's written in German. So they write kind of very similar books with Herzl, but Elchanan Levinsky skips the hardships of creating a state and possible wars and tensions. Just get over that real quick and see how a beautiful futuristic state would look like. And this is a slide that I created for the kids' presentation, but I thought it was super fun because he envisioned a few different things. One of the things that he wrote about in his book, which was, by the way, called Masa'ot Le'eretz Yisrael in Journey to the Land of Israel in the year 5800, which is 2040, so 16 years from now. Okay, that's when his book takes place, and it's a visit to idealistic, futuristic Jewish state, and in that Jewish state, there's an observatory on the Mount of Olives. Okay, because we're scientifically advanced and we're studying the stars. He also foresees a lot of industrial innovation, and he sees that a city of salt, like a metropolis of salt, is created by the Dead Sea, which is nearly true if we think of the Dead Sea Works, that huge factory that might be one of the causes why it's drying out, but that's a different question. And he's talking about machine-driven industry and everything, and that's very huge there. Agricultural revitalization, and it's, of course, he saw En Gedi as turned into beautiful oasis with a harbor. We're not quite there, but if you think of the Negev, and if you think of other desert areas that were turned into greenhouses and gardens, that happened a lot. Hebrew revival, of course, he saw a society where everyone speaks Hebrew, and you can have science, technology, and live your everyday life in Hebrew. Unheard of. Unheard of. And then, of course, he describes an utopistic society where we're in peace and everyone is just allowed to advance without wars. That wouldn't be so bad. But that was his world. So some of it you sense which one of it came true, but a lot of it did, and it still gives me goosebumps because he was really close. He, by the way, also wrote about a country that is a culinary leader and is just so amazing and multicultural, and all of that is true. So he was pretty close. There's no observatory on the Mount of Olives. But that would be cool. So what do we actually have? What is there? We have beautiful beaches that is along the Mediterranean, over 10 kilometers, how many miles that might be. But it looks like this, and I used to live just behind this building a bit in the distance, so it was fairly convenient. What else do we have? Well, the best pizza place in Tel Aviv. It doesn't just, it's of course, it's a musical venue and a concert space and the bar and the restaurant, but the best pizza in Tel Aviv is also found here. It's called the Tedel. It's like the inner courtyard of an old industrial building in South Tel Aviv, just off Eilat Street, near Yafo, between Yafo and Neve Tzedek, actually. What else do we have? We, like, as the capital of a new kind of Jewish vision, the central focus wasn't just the school as a temple, but it was also culture as a temple. So the biggest theater companies, the biggest museums, some of the biggest museums, they're divided between Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, but the biggest theater companies are here, just representing culture. The only opera is in Tel Aviv, and a lot of other institutions. And just, again, the symbolic place where they're located at the kind of as an end of the Rothschild Boulevard, which is the main walking boulevard of Tel Aviv, and you go up to, just if you would go to a temple, you go to these places, and there's hundreds of people swarming into these cultural spaces. There's more buildings next to it for different events and venues, so that's a major one. And Cass brought a beautiful book about Bauhauses, which of course I cannot leave out from this presentation, because this is what gets Tel Aviv on the UNESCO World Heritage Site list in 2003. There's thousands and thousands of them in Tel Aviv, and they're often white, which also gives the city the nickname the White City. But it's also because of the sand, the contrast between the water and the sand, possibly. And the style is the Bauhaus, or international style, as referred to in other circles, and it's brought by the Germans, who leave Germany after Hitler's rise to power. There's a huge influx of them in the Fifth Aliyah. A lot of them settle in Tel Aviv and build these buildings. It is known by being functional, very functional, but also easy to build, kind of. I wanted to say sustainable, not exactly, but easy to build by using cheap materials, concrete. So it's functional, it's easy to build, and somewhat modernistic. So they didn't want it to be proportional or balanced. It's also a philosophy when you look at the architecture of these, and we could talk about that a lot more too. But on the other hand, besides the Bauhauses, we also have the eclectic style, which comes from a beautiful mixture of Eastern and also European and also Arabic, that is more the local style. So you have all of these beautiful creations here. And by the way, this was the first building in Tel Aviv. It's on Nachmani Street. This is the first building that had an elevator in it. So it's very cool. As you see here, I wrote a lot of things about it, but as you see here, it's now owned by a Swedish investor since the 90s. And then here's this, and when I went to tour guide school, my friend who's from Germany asked, who committed this? And well, the answer is the architect Megidovich, who built a lot of cool things in Tel Aviv, but when you look at it closely, they use, again, a very great mixture of different styles. It's called the Palm House. It's just outside the Carmel Market on Nachlat Binyamin Street. It's called the Palm House. You have the palm tree, which is representing the Eretz Yisrael and the Tamar, and that one. Above the entrances, you often have Magen David, which I don't have in this picture, but there's often a combination of Eastern and Jewish, and then some European elements when you look at the windows and the use of the metal, the beautiful metal work, and then the balconies on the most awkward place in, right? Did you see that? It's on the corner, like where it absolutely doesn't make sense, which makes you kind of a bit dizzy and a little bit feeling strange, but it's quite cool. So that's another, that's again expressing like how excited we are, how brave we are. We can do whatever we want because we are building a new city and we're adding our new style. And then there's this, which is built by the same architect as the previous building. This is the casino that is on the beach. This is in the sand, like this is sand already, and the water is just behind the building. You can see the waves a little bit there. The casino wasn't really a casino, there wasn't gambling, we're okay, we're Jews, we can't do that. It was a restaurant and it was a bar, and more like a concert venue as well. Maybe gambling, who knows? But it was known as a kosher in some ways. So this building was beautiful, but only existed in the 20s and early 30s. It wasn't sustainable. It was really hard to maintain because the waves washed it pretty much. It literally stands in the water, and the waves eventually washed it away. So we don't have it since the 30s. And another thing that, not just the buildings and the crazy styles, but of course food and the markets and the spices that Tel Aviv is known for, and it's a culinary scene, and it's a vegan capital as well. So you can just, there's a lot of material that are easy to find, and some of my earlier presentations I gave you one of my favorite recipes, which is a fake carpaccio. If you want it after, I'm happy to give it to you. It could be vegan or vegetarian. And this is one of my favorite pictures. We're wrapping up because my time is ending here, but I stole this picture, as you see, like it's not mine, but I had to. Why? Because the old and new, remember what I've been telling? We are a startup nation of the most powerful, cybersecurity ever companies, and yet you can see these wires, you can see these things in Tel Aviv, and the contrast of living in the first, second, and third worlds at the same time is just overpowering. And this picture represents that for me. So, and this is, by the way, that Shalom Meir Tower that was built instead of Herzliya. So this is right at the heart of Tel Aviv. So what now? When it comes to technology, innovation, there is a lot to talk about, but there's a lot of, considering the size of the country, we have a lot of startups and multinational companies represented in Israel. These are some of them, but more grouped together by different categories. I would just name a few, like Elbit Systems, which is an electronics and car safety, right? And also Wix, which many of us use for website designing. But then there's multinational companies, just like Google and Meta is now there in Israel as well. I'm not naming all of them, you can see it here. But just again, the proportion to which they're represented compared to the size of the country is very outstanding. And then there's a few things that Tel Aviv is leading in, and I invite you not to read this because it's boring. But my favorite thing is the municipality on wheels. It's one of the newer services of Tel Aviv municipality, on which they bring services to people who are not able to come to offices. So you have municipal services to residents you brought to their homes, and that's no other municipalities do that so far from what we know. And there's lots of research and money invested in research and development, and also innovation hubs of major companies. They're all there, and for a good reason. So this would be the end of my presentation. Any questions? Yeah. So, right. Maybe turn on the lights and we'll start from.
Anything distinctive, like in terms of the architecture, does it have its own architecture as well, like a Moshe Safdie? Is there an influence there in Tel Aviv, or is it all the diversity of the best of Germany, the best of Tokyo, and the best of the West? Is there anything unique in and of itself?
It's very mixed and depends on the area that you are in. If you are in North Tel Aviv, you're likely to see more Bauhauses. If you're in